I want to acknowledge my co-author who actually took care of some of my courses yesterday and today teaching for me, Michael Taylor. And I ought to probably acknowledge that the last 3.5 years or so has been quite a learning curve for me, learning about the rangeland ecology. And I've done it in the context of several different projects simultaneously. I've had roles, a little role here, a little role there, and we had some vision about kind of redeveloping or just kind of upgrading the economics of rangelands. And so we had to put all these pieces together. So there's some acknowledgments. Okay, so let me get into the challenges, and then I'll show you where we're going in this presentation. Oops, got to talk right here. One of the main challenges that we've been working with is value changes in ecological services that result from EBIPM requires a marrying of economic models and ecological models because we have an unfolding of events over time. Many people so far today have talked about the fact that a one-time shot isn't going to work, right? And that it's a bit of an interactive process. A one-time shot at first is followed up by assessment and by maybe some more tweaking. And so we really have a long time horizon, and you'll see in one of my examples we used a 200-year time horizon, which most economists would feel really uncomfortable about. But the point is that we want to compare an unfolding of events with and without treatment. And then in the with and without treatment, we've got stochastic events like weather. We can't count on. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. We might respond afterwards. We'll have some more conditional probabilities after that. And then we've got uncertainty because we don't know everything we would like to know about these systems. And with adaptive management methods, over time, we learn more. We can incorporate that increased knowledge about the probability distributions, about whether a treatment's likely to be successful or not. We can incorporate that back into maybe an economic assessment of what we might want to do in the future. So in a sense, we want to make use of every bit of information that we have now and in the future, and we want to model specifically what we don't know. So that in the sensitivity analysis, we can take what we don't know and then maybe determine how sensitive the results are for those unknowns. Gives us kind of an idea of where maybe we want to start getting some more research done, like the probability of success or the cost of treatments if you need to add different components. So those kinds of things, maybe we don't know precisely, but we want to have models so we can kind of get a sense of where to go. So we want to quantify benefits and cost in comparable units. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's really hard to compare biophysical units of like coverage of cheatgrass per acre and sage-grouse habitat. As an economist, it just occurs to me immediately that maybe we ought to use dollar value units. Trade-offs. It's not about putting price tags on things. It's about attempting to incorporate some of these costs and benefits that might otherwise not be easily incorporated. And the thing is, we can add and subtract and multiply and divide over dollars, but it's really hard if we don't have comparable units. So that's a challenge. Economists are pretty good, environmental economists, at dealing with that. So that's one of my specialties. Another challenge is to apply theory and methods that allow for the valuation of Great Basin ecosystem services. There's been very little work done in this system. Other kinds of systems across North America and other parts of the world, there's been a lot of studies to determine the benefits of water quality improvement, but not rangeland improvement in terms of the flows of services. And as I already mentioned, we need to incorporate this appropriate dynamic unfolding of events with and without. So I mentioned ecosystem goods and services, and we kind of know what they are, right? There's ranching, but then there's erosion control. What's the benefit of erosion control? So we know we have a cheatgrass monoculture. We have more erosion, wind erosion, water erosion. So what are the benefits? How do we value that? wildfire control. Wildfire suppression costs are going out of control. We know it's linked to the ecological health of these systems. It's a benefit of managing a system in terms of cost avoided because of additional fires. Water quality, quantity, wildlife habitat, recreation, all of these are the kinds of things that can tip the scales. The other issue that these bring up that I won't touch on here, but we are in the project, is who bears the cost, who bears the benefits. We know that if we improve or maintain ecological health on rangelands, the benefits are substantial in some of these areas, but the people doing the work aren't necessarily the ones that are receiving all those benefits. So if necessary, are there ways of adjusting or accounting for that and transfers? That's the next part of our work, the policy bits. So, treatment is costly. We know that. So how are benefits measured? Cost averted. It's one way to measure benefits is costs that you wouldn't have had if you didn't take the steps. What if nothing is done repeatedly? You repeatedly do nothing. That's kind of saying, like, if you're repeatedly going out there and doing something, you're moving in a direction that you want to go in. What if you don't do any of that? Those costs averted are a benefit. Could be positive, could be negative, and you'll see in our example that we've got a situation where, for prevention, the benefit-cost ratio for just cost averted for wildfire suppression cost alone is, for every dollar invested, $13 back. If it's in prevention, before the ecosystem is flipped to a situation where you have heavy decadent shrubs and an understory of cheatgrass, then we actually end up with a negative. So, but anyway, we'll continue on. Private impacts with monetized values. Okay, so we can measure benefits as, when I say private impacts with monetized values, that would be maybe the benefits to ranching with and without treatment. If we have increased productivity, that's monetized. There's market values. We know how to go about taking the value of livestock and figuring that out, the cost of hay, supplemental feeds. That's monetized values that come from markets. When I use the word public, I don't mean necessarily owned by the government. I mean benefits that flow to the public. And if I receive some benefits, it doesn't reduce how many benefits other people receive. A recreational user who likes to use his ATV or her bicycle out in rangelands on BLM roads doesn't take away somebody else's benefits, right? A lot of these are overlapping. There's no markets for this stuff, but it's important. Okay, so we're going to measure those. And we're doing that in the context of the project. And we also have to take into account treatment cost. So that gets us to what we want to do today. I want to first talk about, I have a slide, and I made this slide today, so I don't also see how well it works. Basic principles and concepts for economics. But you ever took an Econ 101 course and thought you'd never take another one again? I'm making it easy, okay? So we're going to incorporate biology's production function to model with and without scenarios over time in an economic model. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, why it's important, why we need to do a benefit cost analysis that way. It's not easy. And then those principles we use to develop models. And these models are general. So as economists, we're not starting out with setting up experimental designs and getting data on specific plots and then trying to generalize. We have terrible data, so we've started out with general models and then apply specific parameters, see how well those models work, and once we've got them working quite well, then we can parameterize them for specific cases, and that's what we'll be doing with EBIPM sites. So I want to talk a little bit about what those parameters are. And then I'm going to show you 3 models. And the first one is the one I alluded to, wildfire suppression cost, averted. The second one is a dynamic ranch model, so that's more of the monetary values, but we have benefits to the rancher versus, then we can add in wildfire suppression cost, averted, ecosystem services, and then we get, the model also gives us benefits to the public sector, and then we can compare optimizing these two models and get the deviation. So, and that deviation is, in a sense, it's what when we talk about who bears the cost, who bears the benefits, that is kind of an issue for policy discussion, but gives you a sense of how we can measure that, given how we parameterized a model. And then finally, a really quick overview of the pilot study we've done and the full study we're doing in non-market valuations, just to give you a sense of how that works. Okay, this is the picture I made today. Ooh. Okay, so this is trying to make things a little less complicated. Okay, so bear with me. I hate talking in front of this thing. If I talk here, can you hear me? Yeah, oh good, okay. Let's start on this side. And the purpose of this diagram is to give you a sense that, that's the best way to put it. I live in Nevada, and people like to think about going to the casinos and changing the odds in their favor because maybe they're tweaking something they know about the system. They're trying to count cards, they're trying to remember things. And I like the quote earlier, the one from, was it Einstein? I can't remember. And it was Josh that mentioned it, about tweaking, what was it?
Intelligent tinkering.
Yeah, that was it, intelligent tinkering. And with EBIPM, it's much better than intelligent tinkering. I know it's a whole lot better than that. But what we're doing is we're changing odds. We don't know really how well a particular treatment on a specific site is going to work, do we? And we've heard that all day. But when we're looking at a landscape scale, we're looking at the entire Great Basin, we can say that dozens and dozens and dozens of implementations of treatments that are systematically done following a set of rules, a set of tools. By rules, these are adapting, the rules are being adapted over time as we learn. We would expect that the probabilities of success, if you have done a site assessment, you do this, this, and this, that we could establish probabilities of success rates as we keep accumulating this data. That's what the P1A, P1, whoops, that should be P1B, P4A, P4B are, and I'll get to that in a moment. But what we're doing when we implement a strategy is we're attempting to change the odds on probabilistic events. So you start out, this is time, I don't know if you can all see it, time, I don't have an actual axis, years on there, but today, ecosystem services, current value, benefits, and costs. Let's say that, so as an economist, I would want to be able to take a site and then determine what are the main ecosystem services that come from that site, and then using the models that we're developing, assess what those benefits and costs are now. But we know they're going to change over time. Ooh, I don't have a lot of time left. Okay, so over time, if we treat versus don't treat, we need both. We need to know how the system evolves if we do nothing, because that's our comparative level. If we treat, the money that's invested is a cost invested to alter processes. That's one cost. Another cost is potentially the cost of doing nothing. So you need to keep track of those. There's all different kinds of stochastic events and unknowns we've talked about. The area on the top, trying to change the odds. When we're all done and over time, as time unfolds, it's possible that you could end up with, I've got 4 different possible states of the world. Maybe those are 4 different states in a state of transition type model where thresholds between, they could be however we want to define those. But you could have treated and ended up where you wanted to be, or any one of these 4. The probability if you treat and ending up in a poor state, you would expect to be lower than if you treat and you end up in a better state. Similarly, if you don't treat, the probability of ending up here is probably higher than if you don't treat, the probability of ending up there. So what we need to drive our model are differentials in these probabilities. So maybe the scientists don't know for sure. They can't say, nobody wants to say, I can tell you what the probability is if we treat of getting this versus that. Nobody likes to do that. But if we can talk about relative differentials and probabilities, then we can go somewhere. So at the end, we want to, with these 4 states, we have some stylized representations of the changes in the levels, biophysical levels of those ecosystem goods and services, and then we take the differences before and after, with and without. And before and after, with and without. So the BTCT is an expected benefit, an expected cost, probability times the cost, right? Probability times the benefits is expected, with and without treatment, discounted over a 200-year time period. So it's a present value of net benefit. Does that make sense? That's pretty straightforward, right? And the picture helped. Okay. So now how do we do all this? Okay, so I talked about a production function. Okay, as mostly economists we just assume these shapes, these simple, called Douglas or whatever, some simple shape. And we can do that in production in factories because there's all the various hysteresis effects, the strange little thresholds where you go one way and not the other. We assume those away in factories because we wouldn't produce there. But the biological system isn't so happy to allow us to do that. So this is an example in the study that we have I'm using as an example of a stylized state transition model. I know that these probabilities, okay, and these dollar values are probably not representative of every single possible system or even any one, but they're ones that we were able to pull from the literature. So we have the stylized state and transition model, and we have treatment success and failure rates. We have cost of treatment. We have treatment methods. And in this model underneath, what we do on the probabilities, we have an underlying data set, and we assume certain distributions or variables, and then we just randomly pull and run a 10,000 simulation runs. And then we get distributions of overall cost and overall benefits. So the key is working with the natural scientists who have built up this model, and now we're at the point where we want to be incorporating specific sets of parameters. Those are all the parameters. And we have different models we've developed. We've got one for mountain-based sagebrush, and one before that was Wyoming. The reason why those are different is because the underlying dynamics are somewhat different. But again, the parameters need to be done. So this first example of a study, and this one is a paper now that can be downloaded, is the one way of measuring benefits is cost averted. So we thought we'd start with something that people could wrap their minds around. It's actual dollars. Maybe it's not dollars in a market, but they're actual dollars. These are real dollars for management that get crowd out, the suppression of dollars, crowd out management. So the goal is to estimate the net benefits and cost of treatments in terms of wildfire suppression cost averted. And we have uncertainty in here. Remember we talked about wildfire occurrence is a stochastic variable. Treatment success is stochastic. And we also have stochastic, or whether an ecological threshold has been crossed. We assume first that we know for certainty, and then we relax that assumption and say, well, we don't really know. We only know that we might be getting closer with some probability. And so there's a possibility we implement a treatment on the wrong side of the threshold that makes things worse, that costs more. And so we can play around with it. Excuse me. So we have all these parameters that we got from literature. And we did 10,000 runs. And so with the 10,000 runs, we get these frequency distributions of the number of wildfires, the cost averted. And this is where I wanted to get you. Excuse me, I'm sorry. And so so this is the Wyoming big sagebrush. I just want to bring your attention to the bottom line, because the rest of it you can see in the paper. The benefit-cost ratio, that's benefits over cost, using that approach with all, it's 13.3. That means that for every dollar in, $13.3 come back. So it's an investment. It comes back in the future because of cost averted if you maintain a relatively healthy system. All of these systems, in this case, are with an understory, at least some cheatgrass and invasive weeds. So when I say healthy, it's covered up. if waiting until a transition is crossed with decadent, that should be actually decadent shrubs with annual grass understory, it's not worth treating, not in terms of wildfire suppression cost averted. It might be if you add in some of the other kinds of ecosystem services. And so this is an underestimate. And everywhere in this model, whenever we went with the conservative underestimates of benefits, just so people couldn't argue that we're overestimating. We always went the same way. Similarly, when we looked at mountain big sagebrush, this was interesting. Treating, and when I say treatment, this isn't a one-shot deal. Under the different scenarios, we have treatments being repeated, and we played around with when the repeats were. So with the treating when it's before transitioning in a healthy state, benefits outweigh cost, 5.2 to 1. Interesting, moving to phase 1 PJ cover, it's 9 to 1. But then phase 2, it goes negative, and after that, it's not worth doing. So this is to give you a sense of, and then when I mentioned we do sensitivity analyses. Okay, so you might look at those results and go, these numbers are kind of, what do they really mean? Yeah. Well, once the numbers are there, if one agrees with the way it's parameterized, we can then take a look at altering certain parameters. Here, we altered the fire return interval, holding everything else constant. We just changed that, and we looked at how the benefits and costs changed. Oh, am I going way over, right?
Yeah, your time's up.
Okay, all right. So the rest of this is, and it's in this paper, is how to do sensitivity analyses. And then the other 2 examples, okay, we'll get those. Anyway, they're just examples of the same thing, but applied to ranching and applied to ecosystem goods and services.